So maybe if you got it at 7.5, you're taking it at 11 to try to get that 10-point middle. We got, what's next here? Nothing significant. And I don't even want to mention anything significant. We got Georgia Tech against Pittsburgh. So Georgia Tech, 73% of the bets are on Georgia Tech, but only 36% of the money is on Georgia Tech, which is a 37% difference. So there's sharp money on Pittsburgh here. I don't know. I wouldn't bet Pittsburgh. I like Georgia Tech personally, so I guess I disagree with that one. That could be a numbers play, but Georgia Tech, I believe, smoked them last year, and we'll just have to we'll get into that game in a little bit, actually. UAB, 40% of the bets on UAB, 60% on Tulane, yet 75% of the money is on UAB. So there is sharp movement on UAB right there as of right now. Vanderbilt versus Notre Dame. 50% of the bets on Vanderbilt, 77% of the money on Vanderbilt. There's some more sharps on Vanderbilt than Notre Dame right there. We'll talk a little bit about that game. We have Miami of Ohio, only 38% of the tickets on Miami, but 72% of the money is on Miami of Ohio. So the reason that is sharp action. That's why the spread went from plus 15, Miami of Ohio, to plus 13. BYU, plus 21.5 down to plus 21, 65% of the money on BYU, 37% of the bets on BYU. BYU's getting some sharp bets right there. They have a pretty good D line, and so they think they're going to keep that game. I'm not touching it. Wisconsin destroyed them last year. That's one game I'm going to avoid. Boise State. This went from plus 3.5 to plus 2.5. 53% of the tickets are on Boise State, but 68% of the money's on Boise State. I've heard this one go both ways from some of the sharp bettors I listen and talk to. So we'll get into that game a little bit later. Arkansas versus North Texas. 40% of the bets on North Texas. 86% of the money is on North Texas. That is a lot. So just like last year, I'm not touching Arkansas. I did last week and I lost, so that was one of my bad bets.
But they are who we thought they were.
All right, so the next game that has some significance here is Kansas State. 63% of the bets on Kansas State, but 90% of the money, moving that line from minus 20 to minus 21.5. They think that Kansas State's going to, after that loss, is going to beat up on University of Texas San Antonio. And Virginia taking on a little bit of sharp money after losing to Indiana. And not sure why that line moved from plus 6.5 to plus 3.5 to Ohio. But 67% of the money is on Virginia right there. So that is probably some later action coming in. Oregon State versus Nevada. They're at plus 4.5 down to plus 3. So money came in on Oregon State. 66% of the tickets are on them, but 87% of the money. Akron's got 52% of the bets at Northwestern, yet 87% of the money. The line is still at plus 21. People are high on the Zips there. Now, I don't like it because Northwestern just laid an egg against Duke. I don't know what kind of Northwestern team you're going to see in this revenge spot. And the last one is UCLA against Fresno State. Fresno State went from a pick'em down to minus 1.5, coming off a loss. 35% of the tickets on Fresno. 62% of the money is on Fresno State. I kind of like that one. UCLA is obviously new coach, Chip Kelly, but Fresno State should be able to control the line in this game and control the trenches in this game. Let's move quickly to over-unders here and see what kind of totals are huge. I think the North Carolina went from 61 down to 51.5. probably wondering if this game's going to be played. I'm not sure if this one was canceled yet or not. And now that I'm looking, yes, this game has been canceled, as well as West Virginia at NC State. That's about it. Anything big? Sorry, Norfolk State at Liberty was rescheduled. Those are your canceled games so far. We'll see if there's any more that pop up here. And by the way, our thoughts and prayers go for anybody out there that will get hit by this. Please get out of that area. We really hope that the hurricane doesn't do as much damage as predicted, but it is a Category 4 storm. So any of our listeners out there, please get out of there early, and don't try to wait this one out. This one looks pretty bad. I have a buddy out there that's going to be in the Coast Guard that's actually going to be working that weekend, and thoughts and prayers go out to him as well. So let's hope that everybody gets through this unscathed. Moving on, we have Hawaii versus Army. 51% of the tickets are on the over, but 76% of the money is on the over, 62. Hawaii's been playing pretty fast lately, and Army is a triple option team, obviously, so that's an interesting one. Triple option teams I hate taking over 52, 53. They really control the clock with the run, so it just really depends if they're getting out of bounds or not. Then we have Miami against Toledo, going from 58.5 down to 57.5. There's no sharp money on that one. Georgia Tech versus Pitt. We have 37% of the tickets are on Georgia Tech, but only 19% of the money. Sorry, is on the over. 37% of the tickets on the over, but only 19% of the money. So 81% of the money is on the under, and that's because Georgia Tech is a triple option type team. Here's one. You have South Florida at Illinois. This went from 57.5 to 59. South Florida plays pretty fast. Only 10% of the tickets are on the over, but 71% of the money is on the over. That's not a bad one to look at. Illinois, South Florida, over 59. And LSU versus Auburn, 41% of the tickets are on the over, but only 10% of the money is. This thing went from 47 down to 44.5. That's a low college total, 44.5. 90% of the money on the under there. Florida versus Colorado State. 92% of the tickets are on the over, but only 59% of the money is on the over. So it looks like it's getting some under sharp action, under 56.5. Bama versus Miss. So this one went way over quickly. 66.5 it opened, and it's up to 71. An Alabama game, an SEC game at 71 points. That is crazy to me. 61% of the tickets are on the over, but 93% of the money is on the over. And I know Ole Miss plays quick with Jordan, their quarterback, but it is that is something that I cannot believe, and I do not want to touch personally. I'll have to pass on that one. Then you have Oregon State versus Nevada. 55% of the tickets are on the over, but 82% of the money is on the under. 37% difference there. USC versus Texas. 47% of the tickets are on the over, but 93% of the money is on the under. This game last year was, I believe it ended up around 50 points-ish. Let me take a look here. Yeah, 51 points it went to last year, and I think it went to overtime even. So that number is something I'm not going to mess with here. That's pretty close. Washington at Utah went from 48 to 47.5. 96% of the money's on the under. 63% of the tickets are on the under, but 96% of the money's on the under. That looks like a very under type game. I still think I'm leaning that way. So that's your sharp money report for college football week 3. Now let's get into some picks. All right. What everybody's been waiting for, college football week 3 picks. And I really dug into some of these games. I'm excited for this week, and I feel pretty good about them. Georgia Tech versus Pittsburgh. Okay. So I know how pissed off everyone is at Georgia Tech from last week, losing to South Florida. Okay. But you really need to look at what happened at this game. South Florida scored 2 first-quarter kickoff returns for touchdowns. There was a huge disparity in total yards. Georgia Tech gained 602 yards to South Florida's 426. Okay? So, it's sometimes better to look at that. It's more of like a Pythagorean way of thinking of it. This team should have won by 10 points or so. The other hand is that Pittsburgh has been pretty dreadful, I think. They played a tomato can in Albany, right, the first week. Got blown out at home versus Penn State. And Pittsburgh ran the ball well, but they could not get the passing game going. They threw for 55 yards. 55 total yards, okay? Georgia Tech should be able to stack the box here to stop Pitt from rushing. And I also like the fact that Georgia Tech was able to throw the ball a little bit with Taquan Marshall. 189 yards versus South Florida he threw. I'm playing against the Georgia Tech loss overreaction. Georgia Tech wins by 10. Boston College versus Wake Forest. So Boston College came into the season with major steam, obviously. But quarterback Anthony Brown's really living up to expectations. 74% completion percentage and 4 TDs. Now, I know they haven't really played anyone yet, but they're 2-0 versus the spread. UMass was supposed to be decent this year, and they beat them, so it's by a lot. Destroyed the spread on that one. So if you look at Wake Forest, they opened up their season with 2 consecutive wins, and they had a 51-20 home win against Tomato Can Towson last week to improve to 2-0. They played Tulane the first week and was in a very close game until the end. I believe it went to overtime even. Sam Hartman played well, 242 passing yards last week and 2 touchdowns, but I don't think that's going to happen against Boston College's tough D-line. I think the key here is Boston College's great offensive line here. And if you look at Wake Forest on the injury report, it's not looking good. Wake Forest already has 4 guys out for the season and 6 guys questionable for this Thursday's game, including starting secondary Cameron Glenn and Amari Henderson. Both those secondaries are out. I like Boston College here by 9 points. Ohio State versus TCU. Do you like home dogs? I do, especially double-digit ones. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think Ohio State is the second best team in the nation. How do we really know that? It's hard to tell. They only played the worst team in the Big Ten or second worst, Rutgers, and they played the worst team in the Pac-12. They destroyed both teams, though, so you got to give them some respect for that. They got a little chip on their shoulder, but I think the coach factor factors in here a little bit more. And what I learned from watching TCU's got some serious athletes there, okay? And the Buckeyes have had problems with dual threat quarterbacks in the past. We saw this against Deshaun Watson a few years back. But mainly, they're finally playing a good team, and a good coach in Gary Patterson. So this is the game that coach matters, and we don't have Urban Meyer at the helm here, at the lead of this Ohio State team. I think TCU's quarterback Sean Robinson looks pretty good so far, and this game's going to be it's going to be entirely up to this guy. And I think he's going to be able to test the Buckeyes' defense. It could either go really bad or really good for them. But I think that the fact that TCU returned 61% of a top Big 12 defense last year helps. And they're actually currently in the top 10 allowing only 214 yards per game. I